Welcome to the Edgevana Podcast, where we illuminate subjects in the IT infrastructure space. Get ready to hear some amazing insights from outstanding individuals that will change the way you think about IT. And now, here's your host, Mark Thiele.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Edgevana Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Thiele, and joining me today is Chris Psaltis, CEO and founder of Mist.io. Chris, welcome to the podcast. By the way, I should have asked ahead of time, Chris. Did I get your last name properly?
Yeah. You're good. Almost Greek.
Oh, awesome. Well, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days. Who's Chris?
Sure.
What are you working on these days?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, thanks for hosting me. As you said, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mist.io, where we are building an open source multi-cloud management platform. So we've been in the space for some time now, and our main goal is to help people who are trying to build these multi-cloud platforms with an underlying open source fabric. And that's what Mist is all about.
That's awesome. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I really can't wait to get into more of the detail, just because multi-cloud, especially for the last 2 years, has been such a hot topic, right? And a big part of the problem that you've probably suffered through, and we can talk about that more, is even what the definition of multi-cloud is, right? It seems like the common problem, it's like we spent 5 years defining what private cloud or public cloud was, and then hybrid wouldn't even work, and what was the definition of hybrid, and now we're accepting hybrid, but what is hybrid? And oh, by the way, now we're doing multi-cloud, and well, is multi-cloud this or is multi-cloud that, and can anyone really afford it, etc. So this is an interesting topic, and the fact that you guys are trying to solve for it, I think, will be really interesting to our audience. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
And don't forget about Edge, right? Because this is coming in the game as well. So the definition of cloud itself was already hard and hot topic. Now with things changing and Edge getting into the picture, it's getting even harder. And and then what about multi-cloud?
It's like for the modern IT leader, it's like getting a recipe to bake, and it says take 2 lemons, or it could be limes, and 3 cups of flour, or it could be wheat, and then 2 pounds of strawberries, or it could be potatoes. And then mix it all together, and it's like cloud, hybrid, multi-cloud, edge. What do we mean, and how do you mix them together, right? And so, again, I think the work you guys are doing is really important. So I'm anxious to talk about it some more. And with that, it's pretty obvious, anybody looking at your product, even from your intro, that the theme behind Mist.io is really about not public cloud, but about better use and effective management of multi-cloud environments, right?
And by multi-cloud in this case, I want to stress that we use the term with rather wide, let's say, meaning. To us, multi-cloud is mostly a mix and match of different technologies on the physical or virtual inventory that you might be running. So taking into account this rather wider definition, we mean both public clouds, obviously, private clouds, but also hypervisors or containers and Kubernetes and bare metals and anything else you might find out there. So it's more about mixing and matching different types of infrastructure technology in order to achieve the best outcome for your organization. So it's not exactly multi-cloud. Oh yeah, you mean like 2 public clouds or 3 public clouds, and then hybrid is a private one and a public one. I think like over time the term has evolved, and if it hasn't yet, it must, because the situation is changing rapidly, and the terminology needs to adjust accordingly. Going after multi-cloud in a more narrow sense means that you're probably missing some parts of the bigger picture. Right. Back to the issue that you that you brought up. This is where we jump in. This is where we're trying to help organizations. We're trying to help them make sense of this complicated reality. As much as I would like everybody to be like on a single platform and no trouble and everything is great, and such platforms have presented themselves. They came and they go. Like, do you remember, for example, OpenStack, and now it's Kubernetes? One platform will win everything, and everybody will be on that. And who needs to deal with all this complexity of multiple platforms? Guess what? Like, reality, it's much more complicated than that. The reality is more dirty, and you need to do something about it. Otherwise, you're sacrificing your organization's velocity. You're practically leaving money on the table.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, those are whole podcasts on their own about assumptions of one technology owning a particular segment of infrastructure management or infrastructure deployment or something like that, because you specifically mentioned OpenStack and Kubernetes. And while I recognize Kubernetes as a fantastic tool or platform, it's also not really meant as an enterprise tool. It's meant for hyperscale consolidated environments. I'm not sure it's the right platform for widely distributed edge over time, and I'm certain OpenStack isn't the right platform. Certainly not the only platform for distributed.
I mean that's the main reason why we have multiple tools, right? You cannot do everything with a single tool. That's impossible. It will never happen. So you always need to pick the right tool for the right job. So that's how this whole complexity and new paradigms of doing compute, networking, storage are coming up because there are new needs. You need to tackle them.
Right. So is it, and I'm pretty sure that the readers probably got the same message from your opening comments that I did, but is it fair to say that from a Mist.io perspective, why you're using multi-cloud isn't important, right? It's like, because if people are worried about the definition of what multi-cloud is, they might make an assumption that, well, if multi-cloud is this definition, then I need or don't need help in managing it, versus if multi-cloud is this definition, I need or don't need some help. And so, for instance, two of the most common definitions for multi-cloud are you're running different applications on different cloud environments, but none of the cloud environments or applications on any single cloud environment are being shared to a different cloud environment, right? It's basically, if you're using Amazon, Microsoft, and some sort of private cloud, you're basically running you're running 3 sets of infrastructure, just that simple.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And yet some people still view multi-cloud as if you might be running a single application or sets of applications across those clouds. Now, I think most of us would recognize that very few people are doing the latter. In fact, I don't even know anybody that's doing it right now, but I'm sure there are some. But from your perspective at Mist.io, it really doesn't matter, right? If somebody wants to figure out how to create an application that runs on both Google and Azure, you don't care. Or if they want to just run one application on Google and a different application on Amazon, you also don't care. Is that right?
Exactly. And this is the beauty of it, but it's also like the hard part of it. So we are very conscious about what types of constraints we impose to the end user. Practically, we try to impose none.
Yep.
We can have the result that you described right now. So we can have people coming in for whatever reason they're doing multi-cloud and following whatever workflows they're following right now, processes and policies. We want to help them do that better right out of the box without having to go through like a weird migration project for 3 months just to get things started. So we try to be as transparent and running in the background as possible, but at the same time providing you with the glue which can help you integrate stuff more quickly and move forward faster than you are currently doing. So as for the reasons, it's up to you to decide if what you're doing is good or not. So we don't take a hard stance there.
And personally, I mean, not that my opinion matters. It's your opinion that matters on the show, but I believe that that's the right way to go. So, when you think of some of the common concerns industry pundits or quote unquote thought leaders might have relative to multi-cloud, many of them still argue that that multi-cloud might be more expensive and problematic to manage than the perceived benefits, right?
Yeah.
How do you look at that, and maybe even how does Mist.io help accommodate some of those concerns?
Yeah,
right. Like
exactly.
concerns like you have two different security policy strategies, you have different APIs to worry about, you have different service layers to manage to, you have different deployment strategies, all those things. How does Mist.io maybe help accommodate some of those things?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, running multi-cloud is indeed more complicated than running on a single platform. That's easy to understand,
Right.
and it can be more expensive, especially if you're not doing it right. But at the same time, running on a single cloud and not doing it right is also a little bit expensive.
Yep. That's right.
So. The main thing that we try to do here, so we can help our users make the most out of their multi-cloud setups, is twofold, and it's kind of like at the same time it seems like it's pulling from different directions, but in the end of the day it can be really helpful. So from one hand, we try to abstract certain services or terminologies or APIs, some things that are common across all those cloud providers. So you can have like a sense of unified view and more apples to apples comparisons. But we are also trying to dig deeper especially in cases where these differences make a lot of sense. For example, networking, it's not the same. Everybody has something different. And there it makes a lot of sense to expose these differences. So we go both wide, let's say, trying to provide a unified layer, but also deep in its platform, so we can allow our end users to leverage those special things that its cloud does, and make sure that their workflows can work. So we don't impose this unified view of everything.
Right.
And this is like the interesting part, because but also the hard one, having to deal with so many different platforms. We support right now more than 20 of them, so you get the picture.
Yeah. Wow. So if you had to look at adoption for your customers, what do you see as some of the key drivers, like the top 3 or 4 key drivers for customers embracing a multi-cloud future?
Well, in most of the cases that we see, it has happened already in a rather spontaneous way, let's say. So it wasn't like some sort of centralized plan. Oh, okay, everyone, let's go multi-cloud tomorrow, and then something happens. It's just it was just there, several different generations of infrastructure technology, like on-prem servers running VMware, and then some stuff running on a public cloud, and then a new cloud and something else. So it kind of evolved either slowly or abruptly, like from an M&A, for example. We were running only on AWS, and then we acquired company Y, and they're running only on Azure, and now we're multi-cloud in one day. So that's I have to say, like, the majority of the cases, which is fairly reasonable given that most organizations have some sort of history. So as they progress from one generation of infrastructure technology to the other, the old generations don't die. They are not getting migrated, at least not in most cases, because of the cost and the complexity involved and all that. So people just end up with it, and they have to do something about it. There are also, like, some examples of organizations who were very, very conscious about doing multi-cloud since day one, but those cases are mostly related to compliance issues, legal issues. I cannot host my user data outside of the EU, for example, so I need a data center there and a cloud provider there and another one there. Or there is some sort of customer constraint. I would like to deliver this service at the lowest latency possible, so I need to host part of my applications there and some applications there, depending where my users are. So we do see such cases, but by far the majority is, it's happening, it happened, and we need to do something about it.
Right. No, it just makes sense. So multi-cloud has the potential interesting overlap with edge computing, right? And I don't necessarily know off the top of my head whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but and it's ironic because I talk about cloud in general quite a bit, and certainly work with people with cloud strategy and cloud adoption on a regular basis, and I spend a lot of time with edge computing, but I've not really spent a lot of time thinking about edge computing in multi-cloud. So, what's your kind of 30,000 foot view, right? Of how multi-cloud may or may not apply to edge computing?
It depends on what you mean by edge.
Absolutely.
Like, as you know already, edge comes in all shapes and forms, right? So it can be like from a small application running on a router up to like a mini data center running next to a 5G antenna, or even like a custom public cloud region. So it can vary a lot. It's hard to tell right now. It's still, I think, a little bit early to see how everything will play out in the end. But I already see some, potential use cases where edge is more like cloud and less like a small router.
Right.
So depending on, how big is this edge and how cloudy it looks like, then, it's either closer to the multi-cloud paradigm or not. So,
right.
Just like an example, if you're running on AWS and then you have outposts and something else, and then you also like have a Dell mini data center, modular data center somewhere running on VMware. So is this multi-cloud or not?
Yeah.
I would have to say that it probably is. There are certain restrictions and differences when compared to like an all public cloud or an all private cloud approach. But it looks like and feels like a multi-cloud situation. But the closer you go to the IoT space and the sensors and all that, I think that there the situation is probably a little bit different. So it depends.
Yeah.
Like, where exactly are you in this spectrum of edge? Like from huge data center somewhere close to you to a small device in an IoT network. So yeah, it's hard to tell. There's no like clear boundary.
Right. I guess if we assume that each of the solutions you've deployed to the edge are operated on cloud-like infrastructure, there is a higher potential that over time you might have deployed 2 or 3 different solutions that work better on different infrastructure models or different deployment models, which may be better supported by one cloud technology versus another, right? So if we look at a traditional enterprise IT organization, you can see that even if you look at their more modern infrastructure that is cloud-like, heavily virtualized, et cetera, there are still, I don't want to call them tiers, but there are segments designed around certain application delivery models. And I'm assuming, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that. I'm assuming that at some level over time, there will be at least a significant portion of companies that don't just have like, oh, I'm going to be at the edge, so I'm just going to do WASM. It'll solve every problem that I have at the edge. Or I'm just going to use VMware at the edge because that'll solve every problem I have. I'm assuming that over time, there's a potential for your edge to look more like a distributed model of the variety of solution sets that you might actually have in your data center. Does that make sense?
I totally agree. I mean, this is almost certain. You can never say like 100%, but it seems almost certain. And it will pretty much follow the way that cloud evolved, you know, from a single VM and some storage attached to it and a network to like 250 different services and 50 ways of doing compute, containers of service, self-hosted containers, Kubernetes, managed Kubernetes, fully managed Kubernetes, VMs, bare metals, you know, like if we take into account only compute services, I think like there are probably more than 20 right now on AWS. So this is certainly the way that the edge will play out, if not more complicated, especially because the use case is more complicated and the environment is more complicated in an edge scenario. So I count me in. Like that would be really, really interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, I as a longtime practitioner, right? I mean, before I became overhead as the CEO of a company, and when I was on the buy side of the technology discussion, my simple perspective from that experience is that people looking for easy answers to this problem or this potential future might be setting themselves up for failure, right? And how I would argue that they should be looking for tools that help them. It's not about necessarily, you know, the traditional lock-in concern that people have, because I think a lot of times the lock-in concern is the wrong way to look at the problem space. It's more about
the main problem with vendor locking, to be honest, because it's a matter that I'm very concerned about, is that it has been weaponized by vendors so much and for so long that it kind of lost its context. So yeah, like it is a concern for sure. It's mostly like the way you're using it. Like any tool, are you using it for good or for bad?
Right. And I think you know, going into a situation with eyes wide open is your best kind of security or safety net associated with things like lock-in. But I think potentially a better way to think about how you move forward is finding ways to try to avoid painting yourself into a corner.
Exactly.
Right?
That's very, very correct. Yeah.
Right. So, Chris, this is fantastic, and we should probably have another conversation in a few months, because the multi-cloud topic is obviously hot in the industry. It's of serious interest to me and some of the customers that I'm already working with at Edgevana, and frankly, I think it's a critical area of needed, thought and strategy in the enterprise, because as you already said, I think you made a really important point. It's not about whether you will, it's about whether you will knowingly versus accidentally, right?
Yeah.
And if you do it knowingly, then back to the point I just made, then do it in a way that keeps you from painting yourself into a corner, right? Because in a recent discussion, I can't remember where I was having this discussion, somebody was saying that multi-cloud creates more of a data silo problem. And my response to that was, more of a data silo problem than when you had data on Oracle, data on an old mainframe, and data in your VMware environment. More of a problem than that. What about data created by the 7 different SaaS solutions you use that all have their own data location? How is that more of a problem, right?
Yeah.
It's not more of a problem. It is a problem, but it's not more of a problem. And how you manage to it, I think, is what's important. So I think the work you're doing is fantastic. I think it's worth, certainly worth people taking a look at, because anything that can help you, in my mind, to the point of not painting yourself into a corner, anything that can help an enterprise apply more flexibility to how they adopt and how they benefit from that adoption is critical, right? And so my personal, even though I'm not, generally speaking, I'm not trying to sell anybody on anything on my podcast. My suggestion is that even if you're only looking for strategic thinking, it's worth taking a look at what Chris and his team are doing at Mist.io. So Chris, you're welcome. With that, any final thought you'd like to leave the audience with?
No, I think you concluded really nicely. I would like to stress just one thing that we probably didn't cover yet, and it's the people behind the technology.
Right.
Like we talked about being agile and flexible and open tools and open source and all these things, but in the end of the day, it all comes down to your team and how they can implement all those solutions and how they can operate them. So if I had to invest in one thing, that would probably be my team, and then everything else.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a common theme in almost everything I write about or talk about, is that the people are first, right? And if you don't solve for the people, both having the right skill sets, but also in setting up the appropriate environment so that they are naturally rewarded for things that help with forward progress, as opposed to being rewarded for things that might surprise you later, right? And so, like, one of the things, Chris, I don't know if this resonates with you, but one of the things that I've counseled other IT execs on is, let's make a quick scenario. So, Chris, I work for you, and I run your Exchange environment, and you're head of infrastructure, or maybe you're the CIO, right? And the email environment broke Saturday night over the weekend, and I was up all Saturday night into Sunday morning, and I fixed it and got things running again. And then I come in Monday, and you pat me on the back, and you're like, Mark, you're the greatest. I don't know what we would do without you. And so that's all great, right? Seemingly, superficially, what's wrong with that, right? Well, two things they don't have to be, but two things could potentially be wrong with that. One is, instead of rewarding an employee for helping to make sure that email doesn't go down, you're rewarding the employee for being a hero, right? And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but you need to couch that very appropriately, right? And the other part is you're setting up the employee to think, I need to hold email really, really tight, because if I don't, Stephen or Betty might be able to do my job in the future, and then my job's not secure, right?
Exactly.
Because I'm the email god. No one can touch
you just created a small silo there.
Exactly. So anyway, Chris, right. I know we could continue to talk. And like I said, I think we should come back again in a couple of months as the market continues to develop and talk some more, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
I've really enjoyed, thank you. I've really enjoyed having you on the show. And folks, for anyone listening, how can people follow you and pay attention to what you're doing, Chris?
First of all, they can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter as Psaltis, and also, our website, https://mist.io.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you again for being on the program. I really enjoyed the discussion, and try to stay cool over there. I understand that you're having Vegas-like weather, so
yeah. It's almost like Vegas.
That's right.
Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Edgevana Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast listening app or on YouTube. To learn more, visit www.edgevana.com. Thanks for listening, and be sure to join us on our next episode.